Thanks very much, Furman, for inviting me to do this talk. It's a fantastic opportunity to take a pause and reflect. And thank you to all the sponsors for supporting this fantastic event. And lastly, but not least, all the friends and colleagues and the audience here to listen tonight. So I was born in South Korea. My parents had their child, yes, that's me on the left there. My parents actually had their, I guess when they were the age that you were looking at on the screen there, they lived their childhood through the Korean War. Both of my parents were raised by a single mum because their husbands were either killed or taken away to the north side through the war. So both my parents lived with the both burden of sacrifice that their parents made, together with the optimism that came with the post-war progress. And that's in a lot of ways, the background to my childhood. So our family migrated to Australia in 1980. Looking back here, different place. Little did I know that the High Courts in Canberra will become one of my favourite buildings. There I was just visiting as a young one and looking at various curiosities that Australia has to offer, including the big banana. Really, coming to Australia, obviously a pretty milestone event, and it really was a case of being fish out of water, being kind of transported as a young kid, as a 9-year-old, and landing in Chatswood. And Chatswood was very different back then. I was the only Asian kid. It's hard to believe. And really, I had to learn English as I was just trying to attend the class, etc. And the thing was, it wasn't just kind of one thing. It's so many things, from how kids interact with each other, how you call your parents, because you don't call your parents by their name in Korea, neither your siblings, etc., to so many plethora of things. And it's this kind of shock that people doing quite similar things, but can see their relationship and their interactions in the way that they live so differently. And that's kind of sense of, and it was really quite challenging to fit in, and that sense of kind of not fitting in, being a bit of an outsider, or feeling kind of in between. This 9-year-old is a bit of a kind of in-between age to be. I think that's been really instrumental in shaping, I guess, how I kind of bring myself to the world. I have to tell this story because, it's fascinating how different the times were back then. Now I look around at the sushi shops at every corner of the suburb. Back then, someone would have thought it was very, very strange for someone to have a bit of dead fish wrapped in a bit of rice with a bit of seaweed just kind of wrapped on it. And why would you eat such a thing? Now, high school, I graduated in high school in 1988. Through my youth, my heroes were people like Thomas Edison. He was a very key one. Loved the light bulb story, this sort of idea of imagining some new kind of thing that can have such transformative effect on society was just, such a fascinating and inspiring story. But unfortunately, when we came to work experience, there was no job for an inventor. So my parents said, well, why don't you try industrial design? It's probably the closest thing. So had some work experience there, and that was pretty good. And then as I'm graduating, my dad sort of made the obvious comment, going, well, there's not much manufacturing in Australia. You might want to think about architecture. And I go, geez, architecture? That doesn't sound as good and interesting, exciting as kind of reinventing something that completely changes the world. But that's what I applied for, and that's where I ended up going. So the first project, it's lovely to see some uni colleagues here, and they might remember these moments. So this is the first year camp. So I went to University of Sydney, and this was the first design exercise. We each had a segment on that sheet. You can see there on the ground. And we had to design something on that segment. of course, being fresh, we all thought we'll create a masterpiece in our segment. But quite quickly we realised the exercise wasn't about creating a masterpiece on your little segment, but understanding the context, because straight away it became pretty obvious, you need to consider basics, like how do you actually get access? How's the road going to get through all these segments? Or any issues related to land use or scale and all sorts of things. So that was a very eye-opening exercise, just kind of opening up a contextual way to understand things. Rest of the year for me was incredibly challenging. The language that the tutors and teachers spoke at the university talking to that was just completely, just a language I just didn't understand at all. And it is because, particularly for me, maths, science and visual arts was what dominated kind of my understanding of the world. So just kind of walking into what seemed like a complete foreign language, unable to actually make any connections. So I was a pretty average year one student. So having had that result, I've kind of thought, and parents needed some help in the business, so I took a year off and did that. That was really boring. I felt kind of positive in helping, but it did sort of make me choose and say, okay, if I'm going to come back, I'm going to give it a good solid go. And I was really fortunate to have amazing tutors and teachers at Sydney University. And particularly the tutors I had in that first semester of second year really, really transformed the way that I can see the world. So I've always loved the Opera House, even through that first year in general. It's hard not to like the sculptural form, the expressive, the buoyant qualities of it. But our tutor mentioned to me that what makes the Opera House really special is that it actually makes the particular qualities of the harbour more present. And that really blew my mind, because it blew my mind how something can change the perception of things around it. In the way that it absorbs that Australian light, sort of makes present the blue of the water in a particularly more powerful way. It also, in the way that it asserts into that landscape, projects an optimistic, progressive identity to the city and the country as a whole. So those, just kind of picking up little nuggets like that really started to open up how I could kind of think about the world I'm in. The second thing was, and I wish I could remember the tutors that told me those two nuggets, but unfortunately I don't, was a tutor mentioned all the things that we need to live are measurable and all the things that we live for are immeasurable. And that was just, again, super, super powerful for someone who had grown up just in maths, science and visual arts. And together with great lecturers such as Adrian Snodgrass, he was the architectural theory teacher at City University. I think I only understood about 20% of what he said, and I think I only really sort of sunk in about 5%. But one of the things that was uniform across all of his lectures are people understand their place in the world through their worldview, and this is looking at other cultures, Indigenous cultures, etc. So again, sort of this idea that it's not the physical thing itself, but it's how people relate to it and how that connects to different people. The same thing can connect in a multitude of different ways to shape their experience of the world. And all of these things together really did open up a completely new, literally a new world for me, because it just, if I hadn't gone through that, it wouldn't have existed. I would have never been able to experience one part of life and one way of looking at the world around us. So I'm eternally grateful for what I learned through uni. The sort of architecture that really engaged with me was Tadarando. Absolutely beautiful tension that can sit between opposing ideas, tradition and modernity, dark and light, simplicity and complexity. The elemental architecture that can do so much with so little moves. And of course, Ram Koolhaas. I think everyone in my generation were influenced by their work. For me, it was their radical kind of first principle approach to building typologies, their ability to just challenge conventions of the norm of any type, unpack it and reconstruct it in new imaginative ways. The other, through looking at their work, was how much movement and use is also a toolkit in what you design, not just a physical part of what we design. And through the later years of uni, just being kind of absorbed in the world of design and trying to synthesize all of these different connections led me to get interested in writings in other spheres. And Fritz of Caffra was an author that I've read quite a lot of, and it was really taking that more reductivist. It was pushing for science to move beyond, I guess, Newtonian reductive view into something that looks at sort of the more dynamic, interrelated systems, and those learnings in that being where the domain for greatest progress and impact could be. Buckminster Fuller was hugely influential as well, his writing. And it was his observation that Earth is a closed-loop system. It receives a constant amount of energy and it has a constant amount of matter. So every atom in it doesn't leave, it just gets recombined into something more complex as time goes on. And that, again, was just really, really fascinating to read from that perspective, and also that observation that what drives that, or what are the parts of the equation, he called it wealth, but you could call it as carrying capacity or life complexity equals matter times energy times knowledge. And the two-part, the matter and energy, is fixed, so the only thing that drives sort of the incredible kind of richness that unfolds is how the information or knowledge and ideas sort of play through that flow. So I started to ponder this question, which has really been the thing that I keep coming back to, is that we seem to be this amazing blue planet of life that just seems to just float. As far as we know, it's the only one we're aware of. There could be more. And really, if everything, all the things that I really treasure, all the richness, all the complexity, the culture, and all the things I live for, is all around me, how did this happen? And what are lessons I can take from that, and how can I take what I've learned to contribute to that? This was my graduation project, and looking back, I can see some things that I was obsessed about back then, I continue to be obsessed about. So I just really kind of like, I guess, how architecture that can both juxtapose and amplify particular aspects of the context. This is also this is a conservatory of music, and the site that the studio gave us here. So this is another thing that I think repeats, is just ignoring the site and just doing something else. And the other thing is opportunity to see latent potential that can be absorbed into the whole project. So these terrace houses here were converted into smaller rooms for the faculty, and then reknitted into this composition. So, okay, so my first entry into work was AJC and Government Architects while I was at university, and then at Hassel. And it's great to see Ken, Tony, and Jules, and I think maybe I didn't see Jules, but Jules and Ross, they were the directors at Hassel that really gave me opportunities that I could have never imagined. I was really, really fortunate to work on a public building straight from university. And in fact, I thought it was so strange to have the opportunity. I just try to keep quiet and just work really hard to get as far as I can before someone noticed. And then luckily that went long enough. So by the time that we got there, that we can keep going. So yes, it was very rewarding to do that, supported by a project architect that really helped as a young graduate to get this amazing opportunity. Of course, you know, I have to pause here. The most exciting moment in my wife is here, so I have to say one of my most exciting moments in life was this. And we did this. We weren't intending to, in any sense, win or anything. It looked like a really fun competition to do. Ty and I were working at Hassel. We entered it. We conceived and designed it on the ferry back and forth from Manly into work. And the most exciting thing was getting a phone call by the organisers who sort of called, and they didn't actually tell us because back then this is the quality of visualisation we could do. It was a pretty poor Photoshop job. It's just, you can't even get the end, grounded. It's kind of floating. So they were ringing to ask us whether it's okay for them to do a visualisation of the project. And because of the time difference, it's the middle of the night, I get a tired call. They're saying they want to make a visualization. What do you think this means? And we're going, they're not going to do it to everyone. It's got to be at least the finalists, isn't it? And then we go, well, why would they even do it to the finalists? Have we won? And then we had to keep quiet because that's the way they wanted it. So that went on for another 2-3 weeks. And then they called us and they finally tell us. And we're just like, we had one sleepless night that first night, and then we're having another triple sleepless night when they actually tell us, but we can't tell anyone. And then we have the third when we go across and wait to begin. Anyway, it was a super key part of our life. I was 28, I was 35 at that age, and when it was the largest comp in New York history at the time, so we were over the moon. It was just something that you just wouldn't expect to happen. Coming back to Sydney, we really did get engaged in a lot of competitions. The Parramatta Road competition again, never done a whole urban plan, 21 kilometres, but why not? Have a go. I had them here, Frank and others, and Phil, I think, is in the audience as well, and Adrian. Martin Hill, many fond memories through that project. And then the Queensland Gallery of Modern Art, again, there was a site given, but why just put it on the side? We put it across the water. Those sort of looking back at those early days, the other thing that's really present is, of course, there's luck, there's your upbringing, there's things that you learn through university, but of course, the thing that shapes you equally or more the most is the people you end up interacting with. And you're sort of preparing for this talk, other than your personal partner, my wife and family, you spend most time with the work colleagues and my partners, Ty and Steve. And during those early days, we just really didn't have much work. So on the one hand, we come back and kind of feel like rock stars, but really there's not much to do than design your business cards. So you spend more time doing that than any paid work. So we spend a lot of time just talking and interacting, and that social dynamic, as well as just our interest to practice through questioning. So the Times Square project happened through asking rather than asking what kind of ticket first can we design, it was more an expansive query of what can that project be for Times Square in New York. So once we start kind of opening up a more projective and expansive question, it's just such a fun thing to do. You just keep expanding what ifs, and that's the spirit that really drove the practice. And as we do that, again, we do have then extended people that come and join us, and they equally have a bit of sense of adventure, because rather than working for an established practice, there's something in them that decides to join us and practice together at those early days. And because we don't have that much work, we end up spending a lot of time socialising. Back then, we had lunch every day together, went for surf, had about 2 hours off, and then back talking, and often that went late into night. A lot of physical model making and a lot of testing, and that spirit really, I think, carries with us today. And many of these things, particularly sort of talking about my partners Ty and Steve, is that not only do we have complementary and different interests in Ty has a real love of the plan, the order of the plan and the sort of the way that it can bring different uses and different people together Steve has this sort of real fascination about the tactility and the crafting of things. But it's really what's been, I think, what's shaped me the most and influenced me the most is the social interaction. And I tend to be a little bit more rigid and a little bit rational in the way that I think through the world. And I think it's through my partners that's opened up and shaped the way that I bring myself in and practice. The practice has grown from 2008, little small rock star group, pretty young, and Jerome C, Josh Goodmaker, Toby C, Carolyn and Linda in behind myself, Ty and Steve there, and growing to a larger group. Martin's here, I saw him earlier, and then us today and many of the team that he is getting a little insight to the history. The other key moment for us was when TKTS is one decade multiple times. So it took 8 years for it to get completed, and we had very little involvement during the development of it because it was our partner architect in America that developed and documented that project. So it was for us when arriving onto the site after quite a limited amount of interaction, also a real surprise. And initially, sort of some of the, before it opened, you just seeing it just goes a raw bit of architecture, right? And just goes to, I think, the object and what it can do question. So in some way, we've been kind of quite critical, of course, because we didn't have as much involvement in the documentation of it. But what was the most exciting to see and the way that it shifted is when it actually opened to the people. And we observed people coming onto those steps and literally doing a little tap dance. Like they're just kind of arriving at the center stage of the world and being in this sort of exuberant moment of being located, absorbing all the kind of power of the lights and the location that place has. And when we started to see that and see how many people were absorbing and attracted to it, and how that number of people started to shift the psychology of the place as a whole, we started to see, oh my gosh, what are we thinking? It's not about, it's really not that relevant whether we like that little detail or this little detail. It's those bigger things that in the way that what we design can have impact. The other key thing here is through all of uni and practice, we look a lot about site. This project, Linda saying, Andy is here, and Indira, the clients that we've been working with, and patrons of our practice for over now 16 years, and we've done, I think we're coming up to our 10th project on that. And what I learned through that project is really, we knew a lot of our side, and we had a lot of reflection, but we were very kind of quite thin on people. I know it's strange to say. And clients are, in essence, of course, the biggest driver of the project. Not only the driver of the project, but at the end of the day, it's not the stories or the way something means to us. It's how it means to the people who are using and living there that become the lived culture of the place that we create. So they really did give us a lot of time to gestate and work through that project, and that time has meant that we could see how that feeds back into how people relate to the place and how we feel. I'll just read this. It's something I wrote on Luna Seng, but it is reflective of the sentiments I want to share tonight. There's much architecture can learn from landscape. Through that lens, we see a world in constant state of change, where parts interact with each other and the whole. It's revealing that the word ecology comes from the ancient Greek word okikos, which means house or place to live. Ecology is the literal study of our dwelling place. It examines the interrelationships between organisms and all aspects of their environment, and how the two have co-evolved over time. Architecture is sometimes seen as something that stands separate to the natural world, but as one expands the lens of space and time, the boundary between architecture, people, and landscape becomes blurred. All that is solid melts into air. The architecture at Lunasang is a close collaboration with our client, one found in collective understanding of the site, landscape and time. The architecture discussed, planned and conceived across a space of over a decade was given a long time to gestate, with an openness to explore as well as learn from how the site is changing. Like nature itself, the architecture co-evolved with the site and the interactions of participants in the process. There are things learned from one stage that fed into the next, and the slow, steady pace of feedback loops meant the interaction delved deeper and broader, shaping the nature of conversation over time. In multiple ways, we all became entangled with the transformation. There's a sense that architecture emerged rather than conceived and built. No boundary between participant and design, the set and the play. Thank you.
I wonder, you came with when you were 9 years old, and there were so many things that were different to what you were used to. I wonder if there is something that you feel that only Sydney could have teach you. So being here that has had an impact that you think you might not have had it if you were somewhere else.
Oh, definitely. I think because Sydney specifically, I think the natural beauty and the way that, like the base condition seeds the culture that builds on top. And I think there's a distinction of the physical place and the culture that's here. And I don't think it certainly wouldn't have happened. Learning about, I guess, the way that we can relate to the natural systems and the beauty of that in somewhere like Seoul, completely different.
And I wonder, you had when you started the architecture, you were like, I cannot understand these people.
Really was, yeah.
Have you had a moment decades later when you thought, I still cannot understand these people?
Well, I used to really try to read, really interesting architectural theory, etc. But I did really give up after a while. And I found it more engaging to read in ancillary, like related disciplines, and that sort of was more helpful. Yeah.
And what is for you? What is in your daily basis that you have a passion for, beside architecture? Surfing, something that you have it?
Yeah, I really love surfing. We do snorkeling, walking. Yeah.
You have that as part of your week? You reserve your time?
Yeah, I used to have more, but yes, I try to make more time for it. Yeah.
And is there, if the profession of architecture will disappear tomorrow,
yes,
what do you think you will do in order to make an impact with your work? Is there something that you...
I think there are some parallels in the talk. I think the core things that we learn is the first is being able to think across lots of different aspects to synthesize and see patterns and imagine a possibility. This ability to kind of go, what if it could be combined in a particular way? And that skill doesn't necessarily about reshaping physical things for a particular spatial and experiential and functional effect. It could be structuring different kinds of relationships for a more productive or interesting outcome. So I think the thinking skills is transferable, and I think the capacity to imagine can be contributed in other areas. And of course, we need to be able to communicate and engage with others, and that can. So, I guess there would be other areas, but I don't know.
Other ways.
Yeah.
You mentioned that when you were talking about one of your successes as an architect of New York, you said, "Well, my wife is here in this room." How do you feel she has been a good impact in you in your professional life?
Yeah, well, she's been incredibly supportive, and there's a lot of times when talking about spending time with others, there's core parts of it where you spend more time with your work colleagues than at home. So that's one thing. And another is when we first met, she introduced there's a Pierre Bourdieu is a French socialist, social scientist, philosopher who, that was another eye-opening. It's how people, the sense of, it looked at how people relate to their field of work and the values and language and culture, the dynamic that operates within one group of people can be driven, internally driven. I'm rambling a bit here, but it did kind of also help open up. So there's been some positive things, and she's in a related field in international studies looking at complexity in a different way. So
it's definitely, it was an also interesting conversation to be involved with or be in touch.
I think she gets frustrated because I always go back to almost as a single lens of looking at it through a bit of an evolutionary perspective, but it's become a easy way for me to just kind of make sense of what something might be. But otherwise, she's sweet.
All right.
She's,
John, thank you for the beautiful talk. We are going to have now in a couple of seconds the roundtable discussion, but for now, thank you for the talk and thank you for the interview.